This. It's always like off. All right, what's up?
Boy, okay. Hi, let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Thank you, first of all, Edward Hong, actor here, fellow classmate in theater school. Um,
Love.
Thank you for joining. I know this was last minute, but definitely needed in the time of things. Minji's on. Hey, look at all these friends.
I know.
Um, yeah. So how do I know? Edward, please introduce yourself.
Uh, oh boy. Uh, well, we both met at a certain acting school.
Yes.
I'm laughing because this school probably wants nothing to do with me right now. We met in an acting school called Beverly Hills Playhouse. That's how we met.
Mm-hmm.
And that was years ago. But that's how we first met, and then we bumped into each other through other means here and there. Like, yeah,
Events,
like
right?
whatever,
Networking events,
Asian
Asian
school.
American.
Oh
Yes.
yeah. So, so that's how
So,
we met.
yeah. And I think it's great because I've always seen how vocal you are and you posting and advocating about Black Lives Matter representation, Asian Americans in solidarity. So let's get into it. I definitely want people to feel comfortable and invited in this chat. So please, by all means, share your experience being an ally and what that means.
Great. And then, people drop off, be like, man, that guy's boring. Ugh. But, we'll do our best.
No, I think it's important
Entertain.
because we really do need, I think it's a generational thing where we really need to speak up. It's important for us to be vocal, to stop anti-racism in every community, even if it's in our own homes, in our own Asian American community. We got to be honest. We gotta be truthful about our flaws too.
Absolutely. So we'll get right into it. We will
Yeah.
talk about Black Lives Matter and basically the importance of it for us as Asian Americans to support it, as well as the other thing is the ugly elephant in the room, which is addressing the very real, not often discussed anti-Black racism that is found
Mm-hmm.
in our Asian communities that often
Mm-hmm.
more often is excused because it's the whole like, well, they didn't support us, so why should we support
Yeah.
them?
That's
Which now the respect is earned, not given. We will discuss that.
mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about Black Lives Matter movement first off and where our stance is. I guess, since you were so generous to invite me as I'm the guest here, Black Lives Matter is a huge deal for me. Black
Mm-hmm.
Lives Matter is a movement that is badly needed in this country, and it is something that I have been trying to find. Like, I was trying to play the devil's advocate. What are weaknesses? What are flaws of the movement? And right now, the only thing I can find is that, which does have very valid concern, is that it does seem not the movement itself, it's just a societal thing that it seems to gear more towards men than it does towards women and LGBT. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more attention given to, for example,
Right.
George Floyd than to Breonna Taylor.
Brianna, her offices are still free. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
None
totally.
of them have been
Mm-hmm.
charged.
Right.
So it is definitely important to note that. However, I don't think that is the flaw of the movement itself. I think it's just, like I said, it's just a societal thing where,
Mm-hmm.
men do tend to get more of the attention than the women do. So,
Definitely. Agreed.
so
In
yeah.
all communities, there's class systems and misogyny even in our own Asian American community where women are traditionally taught to be quiet. The men usually have a little bit more of an upper hand traditionally. So, going back to what you've been doing, how has your experience been kind of advocating being an ally? I know I confided in some of the things that we ran into, all
Right.
these commentators expressing how it's like, oh, I'm not going to support the anti-blackness in our community until the Black community supports anti-Asian. And that was just like really hard to combat sometimes, especially with the older generations, I think. So have you had any experiences that you can
Yeah.
share?
I mean, it goes back. I mean, like, it's even before, like, I really became aware as, for example, as a Korean American,
Hmm.
like, it's always been, especially within the Korean community, there's always some sort of, like, complicated history with African
Yeah.
Americans.
In
With
K-Town.
make sure we consider all sides.
Right.
Please don't judge and jury until we get all facts, due process. Yes, it is important to be, to get all sides as much as possible, which is why
Hmm.
when I talk about, for example, I'll start specifically with the Korean and the African American relationship, and where
Hmm.
one of the biggest turning points where it really collided was obviously the LA riots back in
Right.
1990.
Rodney King
And
riots. Yeah.
so, this is something where most Koreans nowadays don't remember how
Mm.
things have happened, like how events turn. Because what most Koreans like nowadays is that, they'll say like, oh, well, they burned our businesses down and, that's what happened. And I'm surprised by many of them that don't remember why that happened, like
Hmm.
what led to, the anger being turned against the Korean community.
Hmm.
And so with the LA riots, that happened because there was a Korean woman who,
Who shot?
who shot
Hmm.
a black girl named Latasha Harlins.
Hmm.
And so, yes, in terms of who's guilty of it, it's a very messy story. Like
It
there's
is.
no real like, who is, more guilty than the other.
Hmm.
But what came clear was that the outrage definitely got focused not only on the LAPD and just white people in general, but also on the Korean community because she got shot, Latasha got shot, and then there really wasn't that much of a consequence for the woman who
Hmm.
shot her
Hmm.
because it was deemed as self-defense.
Hmm.
And so because of that, that's where the bigger enemy is the media.
Right.
If people are going to talk about like, who is, how did this all come about? And, why do, joke, why do black people hate Asians? Why do Asian people hate black people? A lot of it in America has been exacerbated by the media.
Agreed.
Because if anything, oh yeah, just as a warning for any white people who watch this, when I use the term white people, I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about the white patriarchal system. So please, my fellow white people who are watching this, don't get offended when I say white people, white people, or whitey. These are, they're not slurs. They're not, it's just a general term to describe the idiocy of America. Um, so all right, so I'll address that and use this. The shooting wasn't self-defense. Please expand. Yes. Um, but yes, so the media played a big
Hmm.
part into what a lot of term that is used against minorities is divide and conquer. Is
Yes.
that they were always pitted against each other, and even
Hmm.
before the LA riots happened, is that like I remember the Times magazine even had like a cover. It's infamous. It's like the model minority. It's like
Yeah.
this. We became like the honorary white people.
No.
Like that was what we became. And so when that happened, of course, like resentment was going to happen
Hmm.
within other communities that have been disenfranchised, have been beaten down for centuries.
Right.
And so to see all of us, white people always be like, oh, look at these Asian, look at the successful Korean or Chinese or Japanese businessman. Look how
Hmm.
they came from Asia with nothing, and then, now they have their own company. That
Right.
is
The
always the
myth
standard.
to divide.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
that is
sad.
something to remember. Like that's always there, and we still have this model minority stereotype. It's
Hmm.
not going to go away because we're still a minority, and that's always going to be the perception that people have of us.
Hmm.
And so that's also where the LA riots came into play, and then now addressing what Cami said. So yes, it was there was justifiable reason why the with Latasha Harlins and the Korean one was self-defense. There was a brawl. She did she did swing at her, but then she walked away. She
Hmm.
walked away, and the Korean woman grabbed her gun and shot her in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where, this is where I'm like, that's where arguments of self-defense gets very messy. But I'm under standpoint, when a person perception is reality, it's not perception is reality, there's security camera footage. There's security camera footage that she walked away and the woman shot her. Every time someone walks away, there's no need for a provocation, no need for hostility. That if even as a threat, if they're walking away, you don't need to shoot them, especially if it's a 15-year-old girl who is unarmed. So that is my bottom line. That's where it's I don't side with the Korean woman. I side with Latasha. Was it right for Latasha to get aggressive? No. But did she deserve to be shot in the back?
No.
No.
That's the same for Ahmed Arbery. He was running away from the shooters, and they shot him.
And that, yeah, but even him, this is the thing. It's like, we're going to talk, let's go right into it. We're going to talk about the very real anti-Black racism that, either is very overt or very microaggressive within the Asian community. Right. And right now, there's been a lot of that, especially when the protests were at its, when it was at its most passionate. I'm going to come from the standpoint that, and I know this might seem a little controversial for some of you, that the protests, when every time burning and looting comes along, generally, and I'm going to say generally because this protest has been very weird, but generally, anytime outrage happens, because let's say Ferguson, or let's say like Trayvon Martin, any of those people who got unjustifiably murdered, when protests happen, it is angry. It is like a tornado. And like a tornado, there is no proper protesting. And this is where I think a lot of white and non-Black people of color always, demonize, the Black population. They're like, oh, they should have protested properly. They should have known what to do. Right. They should have been like Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is always used as an example of like, oh, yeah, he was the good Black person. And I'm like, okay.
But he wasn't favored when he was still alive. He was actually deemed as
public enemy number one.
Yeah, an enemy.
He was public enemy number one. Everyone hated him. The FBI hated him. Everyone. Right. Chances are, if MLK was alive today and doing what he did back then, I think most of us would have hated him. That's the honest truth. Yeah. We're only we're like, oh, well, he's peaceful because he did this. And yes, I know people are going to bring up, well, Malcolm X was the much more militant, violent person. But the thing was, MLK, when his roots started, he was the aggressive, passionate type. Right. He's not the calm guy that everyone loved to believe. Right. And also, let's be fair, when the protests, when he was leading the march, and, it was very peaceful. Everyone loves to use that peaceful image of like, oh, look at them all handling, they're like doing it so well. And then like literally minutes later, all of them got either hosed down, got bullets on them, shot. Like it was not a pretty sight. And so,
there's a lot of things that media did cover, and it's true. I've actually heard a lot of activists from the Black community say, you know what, that's what they've been trying. Martin Luther King did do the peaceful protest, but there wasn't that nothing happened. Not nothing happened, but it took so long. And this is the people are like, you can't tell an oppressed group how to protest. And it's true. I've talked with friends too. It's like, it is true. I've seen people talk about how this is an action of how frustrated people are from their own community, that they have to show it in some means. And I think people do take advantage of it. There are people that I've seen looting who don't support just to support, the Santa Monica surfers. It's kind of sad, it's just like, are you looting because it's an opportunity? So, I see it, and it's sad that there are people who are monopolizing off of it, especially there's white supremacists who are, they say there's people purposely trying to loot to make the Black community look bad. So there's all sorts of things that get messy into it too.
And you just brought that up, which is excellent. This protest happened, especially in earlier, like last week or the 2 weeks before, where, when it came to the burning and looting, it was very interesting in that it's a different group. It's like it was a completely organized system of the looters where they had their own thing. And so like my friend who was
Mm.
participating in the Santa Monica protest, he would notice like he would, it would be on Third Street Promenade, and he would notice like, a truck came by and three very,
Bricks.
they were, bricks, and
Yeah.
also there were three white hipster kids just, that waited at the fence, and
Hmm.
then one of them jumped over, and it was a very systemized process of getting the goods,
Oh, yeah.
putting in the truck, and leaving. And he's like, "Oh shit, that's wow, they really organized this." And so,
Hmm.
not just to blame it, I'm just, I know when I said, "Oh, it was white people did this." No, I know other people of color have also joined in part of the looting
Hmm.
and the burning as well. But what I noticed is that, in terms of the most extreme events that have occurred, like strange enough, it has been non-black people. So when, for example, for Los Angeles, when the curfews were hit down on us, like it
Hmm.
was a specific turning point where the protest was happening in the Fairfax Street, and there were a lot of people, a lot of angry people, but pretty civil until a white woman went up to a police car and blew it up. And that is
Oh,
when
yeah.
everything went absolute
Haywire.
dog.
Yeah.
Yes. And so this is where it's like, we have to look into the possibility that, what's the term? And I'm going to mess this up because the language is very French. It's a provocateur, or as my partner would say, you sound really dumb saying that. Just say instigator.
Hmm. Yep.
Instigator.
Definitely a lot of
Instigators
those.
are very real
Dangerous.
threat
Yep.
and they've been there for every protest when it comes to addressing racial injustice. There
Hmm.
have always been instigators, whether it's from white supremacist groups or from the police itself. And we have come to learn that it's funny that in high school I used to love the group Rage Against the Machine, and there's a song from them, Know Your Enemy, where it's like those who work forces are the same who burn crosses. And
Mm.
I never understood that. I didn't get what that meant as a kid. And I was like, now I'm seeing it, because now you're
Yeah.
seeing reports of like a lot of these police officers have ties to the KKK
Mm.
or white supremacy
Scary.
organizations. And the most hilarious part is that like, there was a TV show that seemed to have predicted all this happened. That was Watchmen.
Mm.
That was the whole point of that TV show, which was that there were police officers who were part of the white supremacist organization. And so
Mm.
that is a real thing that, that needs to be looked at, that, a lot of the police force, and yes, I know there
It's
are
a
people
system.
who say, no,
Systematic
it's,
racism.
it's a systematic racism, but, and there's going to be an argument. Not all police are bad. Police people, there are good police people. And
There
yes,
are,
there are undeniably good police, but we have seen all too
but
well,
yeah.
especially with police officers who resigned because they fired a police officer or they fired a police chief, that they resigned.
Hmm.
They didn't want to fight up the system. They were part of it. They were part of
Hmm.
the corruption, and that's why they quit. And what does that
Hmm.
tell us? That tells us that it's not just a few bad apples. There's a
Hmm.
lot of bad apples in this, and
Right.
so yeah.
I think it's important too to recognize that if there are like good people in the police department, just standing by and not doing anything like Total, that's just as bad. I think knowing good from bad and being, a a good citizen and saying, hey, that's wrong, and standing up to something wrong is just as powerful, especially if you're in the police force.
And
So
that's the hard thing
that's
with the
hard.
police. It
Hmm.
is, from what I've heard, it is like a fraternity where
Yep.
it's like you don't want to go against the group. And
Hmm.
so and there are stories of police officers who have been good citizens, who have tried
Hmm.
to stand up to what's right, and either they get discharged, they get fired, or like some, bullshit reason why they were let go,
Hmm.
or they're outright humiliated by their peers, or even like
Hmm.
assaulted or abused by them because
Mm,
they
yeah.
spoke.
Hmm. They
And
went out of
so
line. Yeah.
moving along. And
Hmm.
so it's like, and we're seeing that all too well. But let's go back to say we kind of like diverted, but they're
Yeah,
all
we
good.
did.
Um,
Going back to the Asian
so
American experience and how we can support.
exactly.
Mm.
Um, so okay, the biggest question that I've seen in terms of when Asians ask why should we support Black Lives Matter, why should we do this when Black people didn't support us, especially when during the beginning of the pandemic, we had all the hate
Yeah.
crimes, you know, a lot of beatings, a lot of ugly shit that was done to the Asian American community.
Right.
This is where, unfortunately, I need to point out, you know, articles that tend to like exacerbate the situation. I saw recently Neck Shark did an
Mm-hmm.
article about like, oh, this Black teenager beat up this woman, and it was like this horrific photo of the woman being beaten up, and so like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that's not to say that it didn't happen. Of course it happened, and it's terrible. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is that when you put that article in a time like this, it honestly divides
Divides.
more than
Mm-hmm.
it like brings people together.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, because and I started having arguments with, you know, the Asian people in, you know, when they were posting that, because they're going to argue that, well, you know, a lot of time, you know, they'll say from my personal experience, you know, a lot of the aggressors, the attackers were Black. So if they're Black,
Mm-hmm.
why should we support them? And this
Mm-hmm.
is such a complicated argument because, like, I know a few days ago, my partner and I, we had like this yelling match with her mother and her boyfriend for about 2 hours in the
Mm-hmm.
kitchen till like midnight. Because, you know, they come from an older generation, and, they saw a video and they shared it to us. It was like, oh, look at this Black man just like punch an old white woman in the face for no reason, and just start laughing about ha 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 ha.
Mm-hmm.
And then we looked at her, we're like, okay, what's the point? She's like, well, when you go outside, watch out for Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, can you repeat that again? Or just repeat what you just said again. And she's like,
Yeah.
when you go out, watch out for Black people. And then we just like rammed in her hard, like, okay, what do you mean Black people? Are you
Mm-hmm.
saying this Black person? Or are you talking about Black people as whole? She's like, well, statistically, you know, Asians are weaker. Asians are this and that and this, and Black people tend to prey on that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh boy, okay. This is where it gets into the very real racism that, you know, that the older as well as the current generation have. And, you know, this is where, yes, it's good to not demonize, you know, anyone. And so I try
Mm-hmm.
to understand, why did racism get, you know, ingrained in, especially in the older generation.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, you know, let's say, you know, I'm just thinking of like the LA riots. It's like, you know, if there's a Korean guy, he works at a store, and it's a predominantly Latino Black neighborhood. And, you know, if that's majority of it, and also remember model minority,
Mm-hmm.
there's a model minority thing that's like hanging over your head. And so there's already resentment. And so, you know, when you've been propped up by white people are gonna be like, well, fuck you. And so they're gonna do things to, like, you know, fuck that up. And so it doesn't mean that, you know, that's just like, oh, all Black people hate, you know, they're gonna like terrorize the Asians or whatever. That's not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But what it is that you know, you have to look at it as an isolated situation, which can be difficult if it keeps happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's like, you know, for anyone, if it's like, you know, if you as a woman are constantly harassed by men
Yeah.
and constantly being treated like shit by men, of course you're gonna be like, well, fuck men.
Yep.
Men are garbage. Like, you know, and I'll be like, yeah, men are garbage, because the system, the way our patriarchy is, our society is, that men are. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we have been taught garbage shit. We have been taught that, you know, we are better than this and this and that. We
Mm-hmm.
can literally mansplain all the time, all that.
Yes. Agreed.
Oh, it's the same thing. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing that when
The
you
system.
see,
Mm-hmm.
it's a system. It's like when it keeps happening to you, and that's what the
But we
mother's
got to
boyfriend.
fix the system, right? It's
Yeah.
like, so it goes back to the thing, what I've learned is we have to help the communities and our own communities. It's going to be like a cycle. You know, that's why it's like defund the police, because you're refunding into programs that would invest in these communities who are struggling since 400 years ago, you know. And so I think in order to get into the original problem is that the reason why these hate crimes are happening, and these maybe even people are, from the Black community are stealing from the Korean or the Asian community, is because they don't have anything. You know, there's nobody really, you know, intervening and teaching, you know, and giving these people the support. So of course, what are they going to do? You know, it's like, So I think if we understand the root, it's like, that's why it's like, yeah, if police department can afford, you know, all these weapons and hurt people and teachers, you know, how can we find programs that can, you know, and people call the police for like mental health issues too. And you think these police officers know the difference between somebody who's mentally ill or somebody who needs help, you know, and they shoot them, you know, it's like, or something, you know, because they don't know. And that's why we got to know how to call the right people, you know, like even like for civil arguments between relationships, abusive relationships, you call the police, but do they care? Men are they'll be like, oh great, you know, I hear my girlfriends talk about that sometimes too. It's like, yeah, I called the police, but he didn't really care. And you know, it's like you're kind of, who do you call, right? And it's like we kind of have to reinvest in programs who can help the community and encourage and inspire them. And it's like, if you're going to keep these people, whether in any community, in any minority community, Chinatown had redlining too. Koreans had redlining, and K-Town had redlining too. But you know, how can we reinvest in a way where these communities can get help and they don't have to resort to stealing, shooting, mobbing, going into gangs and drugs, you know? And I think that's really important, is how do you encourage these people? You know, we are privileged because I think traditionally our parents, you know, we did favor education. We were brought up to favor education, say, hey, finish your homework. You know, but that's why I see all these like young kids. Did you see that Mulan spray painting? It's by young teenagers whose parents don't care, or maybe they're too busy, you know, working because they're immigrants and they're working as, you know, 12, 13-hour shifts. They don't have time, you know, because they're trying to work that minimum wage to feed 3, 4 children. And that's what humbled me too when I was working as a bartender, was the privilege and the power of having choice. You know, in being in a creative or whatever, is that we have the education, and I chose to go into film and to be, you know, a representative and to work in these like restaurant businesses where some of these people don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. And then you're humbled. I was so humbled by some of these people who became my friends, these chefs who work so hard, these dishwashers who are, they live on the streets and it's the only thing that's feeding them. So it's like, of course the system is pushing them down. So it's really humbling to know that, you know, like when you're woke, it's sad to say, it's like you have to realize that there is our American, Asian American right to, that's the thing about America, is it's unfair, but at least we can fight for it and be aware of it. Right.
Yes.
So, and it's like, that's why Asian Americans, I'm calling out to every one of you, my friends, you know, is that we got to speak up, because we're doing ourselves an injustice if we keep quiet, you know, and that's why we're doing this right now. If we are not speaking up, if we're not fighting the good fight, then our voices will be erased. And that's why we got to support the Black Lives Matter movement.
You brought up a good point. Oh, sorry. Oh, you had more to say.
No. Yeah.
You brought up a good point, and I think this is the thing that what's been great about this particular protest is that I've seen a lot more introspective moments from our, you know, from our Asian community, from our white community friends, you know, in terms of really looking to the fact that all of us, especially, this is my belief, and I know people are like, no, I'm not like that at all, is that I believe every white, non-black people of color have a degree of racism within them.
We all do. It's hate.
We all have it.
We're not perfect.
We're not perfect. And I know there's that dumbass Avenue Q song, but hey, they got it right when it's the whole everyone's a little racist. It's true. You know, we have that degree with all of us. And sometimes I remember, you know, if you ask like heterosexual men the most like primal, gross question, and this is where you can really find out if they have a degree of racism in them. It's like, okay, so this question was asked to like white men and non-black men, and just be like, okay, when you watch porn, what do you watch? Who's the guy? Who's the guy?
Yep.
Who's the girl? And you're gonna find out that the overwhelming majority, including myself, you know, because I thought about it too. I was like, well,
you're getting real.
Oh,
Eddie's getting real. Yeah, that's
like,
why
okay,
women are fetishized.
Yes.
that I can't even say.
Because it's
That
like,
I.
and then if they do like black women in porn, it's usually, and this also applies to the film industry and the music industry, they
Mm-hmm.
prefer lighter skinned. They prefer the
Mm-hmm.
caramel skin.
Colorism.
And then, when it comes to what do guys watch? I'll tell you what guys watch.
Ah!
They would rather watch a white man, usually a white man, fucking the non-black woman. That's usually what
Oh
they
my
watch. That's
gosh.
always.
We're
Let's
talking
just
about
yeah,
porn,
let's
guys.
get down to it. And so it's like, and then
Woo.
Asian guys, it's like, this is also our own stereotypes and our own like self shit, where it's like, there are legit awesome Asian male porn stars out there, and you're like, would you want to watch that? And like, hell no,
Real
I'm gonna
talk
watch this
here.
white dude. I'm gonna
Real
watch this
talk.
white dude right here, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I realized, oh shit, yeah, me too. Fuck. Yeah. So this is like
It's
Denise. Hi,
media.
Denise. Wow.
Media. Media is a
Oh boy, they're
powerful
like, what?
tool. What
Yes.
we
So
see.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
most like basic, gross, primal component, which it does apply into like, where asking for a friend. And so it's like,
Yeah.
that you got to think about that. And that's where racism starts. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you got to start with the most primal. Not the whole
Mm-hmm.
like, the whole like, oh, I'm never going to be racist. I don't see color. Like, oh, he's my friend or that. I'm like, let's just go right down to who do you fuck? Like, that's it. Like, just like, you got to start with that.
Right.
And then you have to acknowledge that. And so some people like, yeah, I never date black guys because I just don't like black guys. They can like them as, as a friend, as a really good, all these kind of things. But, some of them will be like, I don't date black guys because I have this racism that's
Mm-hmm.
within me. And so, and that's something to, once you acknowledge it, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. And that's where I think people get so like, especially with some white people that I talk to, where it's just like, just admit it. You got some racism in you. And
We
I
all
think
do. Uh-huh.
people don't want that because they wanted to see, that and I get we're in this climate where we want to be perfect. We want
Mm-hmm.
the, I'm not the racist. I'm the completely woke individual. And look, it's good to be woke. It's good to be all that, but you got to know that there's no like finish line to
Mm-hmm.
wokeness. Like
Mm-mm.
you're always gonna evolve, and there are things you will just not even
Mm-hmm.
think about, like, um, and so it's like, there are things that I completely didn't understand or made fun of. Like, for example, like I remember like 5 years ago, I made some pretty like harsh jokes about trans people because honestly, I had no idea what the hell trans people
Yeah.
were about.
We
What is
all
that?
grow. We all make mistakes, even when we're young, especially, and
Yeah.
I think it's very humbling to admit, that we are imperfect and we were young and
Yes.
we keep
And
growing.
not
That's
only
life.
you will continue to be imperfect
Mm-hmm.
all the way throughout. You'll
Mm-hmm.
learn something, and that's the thing where it's like you always have to be, and that's hard because I know that as we get older, our opinions harden,
Mm-hmm.
and so whatever mindset we had about particular people, it's hard to like let that go.
Psychological. That's funny you say that because it's true. And we have to mentally unwire while we're still young. That's why there's still hope in Gen Z and the younger generations
Oh
because
yeah.
they're more, it's like we have to mentally unwire and undo, these prejudices and even normalize. That's why we're normalizing in our conversations. Like the thing is how do we normalize anti-racism? We can't completely get rid of it. It's like trying to ask for world peace. How do we at least be aware of it? And how do we at least improve it in every industry that we're in and feel normal that it's like we're not crazy. It's like, I have another story. So this is what happened to me when I was in Coachella and when there was a lot of looting happening around. And I think it's so mentally, psychologically mind effing that I was like, whoa. Okay, so I was walking around and some guy, I felt someone took something out of my pocket, like my front pocket, and right in front of me. And I turned and looked, and this, I'm gonna have to say it was a white guy right in front of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I knocked it down and this was actually I didn't see who it was first, but I knocked it down and my phone was on the ground. a friend stepped on it, and then this other girl was like, "Oh my gosh, did you take my phone?" So it was a planned robbery, you know. So she dropped her phone too, and it was like, but the question is, and it took me a while to realize, I'm like, who did that? Because I didn't see who like shoved and tried to take something out of my pocket. And it's planned because I feel like mentally we're like, oh, we wouldn't blame the white guy, right? And the
Yeah.
minute I picked up my phone, he was like, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And like when I walked away, I was like, you know, and I told the police, they're like, yeah, that's a planned robbery. And it's like, it's crazy that these looters or these young people would do that, because it's like, if they were any other race, if he was Hispanic, if he was black, would we have, like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like reaction wise, like I was so shocked that I was like, but he was right in front of me, you know what I mean? And I was just like, this is like a psychological thing. And I think it's, yeah, be careful, guys. You know, it's, and it goes the same for what happened to Vincent Chin. I'm bringing Vincent Chin back because this
Right.
happened in, like, you know, he was 27 in the 80s or 70s. His mom tried to, she's a Chinese immigrant. She fought so hard to get those police, those murderers, two murderers, not police, these two Caucasian men into jail. They never got sentenced. They were charged for manslaughter, charged $3,000. And you know, that's so sad. It's like, but if they were another race, if they were black, if they were Hispanic or Latinx, like would they have been charged differently? And that's something we got to ask ourselves. Those men are still living free today. The mom was so heartbroken because there was not enough voices, there was not enough care about an immigrant mother fighting for her son's life, that she went back to China. And Vincent Chin was adopted. Like, how broken is that? It's like, you are an immigrant, you come here thinking you have a better life for your children, and something like a death happens to your own son. And these two murderers are, you know, they didn't get charged, they didn't get any prison life, they didn't get anything. And she was so heartbroken that she went back to China. She went back to China. She was like, you know what? These people don't care about me. The system is flawed. You know, and that's why it's a reminder to the Asian American community. We got to stand up. We got to support Black Lives Matter, because it's an umbrella for all these injustices of a system that favors a particular group, which is unfortunately Caucasian. And I say this for sexual assault victims too, females. You know, who's that young guy who raped a college girl, and his dad was like, oh,
Buckner.
yes, he was like, oh, you know, he's just a kid. He had like 20 minutes of fun. Dude, the girl was blacked out, and he didn't get, like, it was like, I don't, he didn't get any prison time. It was like, what, like, if he was black, but if he was Latinx, it might, if he was Asian, would it have been differently? You know, and it makes me so angry, and people, that's why we're frustrated. It's like the system, even the legislative system, you know, is flawed. And that's why it's like, hello, no wonder we're all, and they have the audacity to tell us we're complaining. It's crazy.
Oh man. You brought
Yeah.
up Vincent Chin because we just passed, was it June 23rd?
Yep.
That was the date he died. And that
Rest in
was when
power.
it happened,
I think
1982.
yeah.
Somewhere in the early 80s, I remember that's
So
when
he's
he
as old
passed
as our
away.
fathers. You know, like
Yeah.
my
Um,
he's like, he was only 27. And I want to bring to, like, you know, when I was trying to advocate for Black Lives Matter, some people had the audacity to comment and be like, why are you complaining? I was like, as an Asian American, we, you know, like, we're fighting for the injustices too, or something, you know, the whole post about Black Lives Matter. And somebody had the audacity to be like, why are you complaining in America? As if being, I almost cussed, as if being Asian
Cuss
Americans
all
are
the
like,
way.
oh,
Fuck me, fuck me,
you're
fuck, fuck.
lucky to, first of all, be in America. Why are you complaining? And it's like, we're complaining because, one, it's not just about, like, you know, yes, we're blessed to be in America, but there's so many injustices which we are fighting for. And I'm fighting for more room to hire more people of color and to be more aware of these racial injustices. And they have the audacity to be like, well, you know, why are you complaining? And someone else told me, this is also a misogynistic thing. it doesn't matter. They're like, oh, why are you complaining about the film industry, about not being even? And they're like, it doesn't even matter who you sleep with either. I was like, why are you saying this to me, a female? Like, if I said this to you as a male, like, oh, it doesn't matter who you sleep with, it's like, isn't that weird? So I was like offended. I'm like, how dare you say that? Is that all I am to you? Someone who can sleep around? That's awful. Like, I was so angry. I was like, how can you say this to me? And then the person was smart enough to delete his comment because I was screenshotting. And people are saying like, oh, is that what you want? Like, you want a handout? You want people to forcibly hire you? And I was just like, no, it's not. It's about opening up your aperture. It's not just about one pigeonhole type of person. We've worked hard enough. There's not enough stories that are greenlit from people of color and Black community, LGBT, disabilities, and it's like that's why I'm like, every industry we got to fight.
I agree. Everything is, it's not, everything is connected. Like, I know people are like, oh, but you're an actor, you're this, how can you complain about it? There's no connection. Like, the whole Black Lives Matter, police brutality, like everything is connected. And that's where, people who fail to understand that is the one that, they're completely off the mark. Like, as an actor or as an activist promoting the civil rights, it's like, if we cannot have, the basic common the human decency and the rights for all, then it's like, it's not going to apply to the film industry. It just won't. And sometimes, it might feel like it does, but then you have to be careful that it's used as a prop, or it's used as the token, or it's used as like, oh, we're going to feel good about stuff, which is why I'm so glad that there's a reckoning happening with the, with the theater world, with the film world, where, Black entertainers are calling out the industry, like, in terms of theater. It was like, was it We See You? There's an order called We See You, where they wrote the letter addressing that, white theater, majority white theater-led companies use, minorities as like the token. It's like, here's the minority play of the year. And they're going to be like, oh, I'm so glad we had a Black play. I'm so glad we got the Vietnamese Viet Cong play. We got all these things going on. And then we're like, good. All these other plays of stupid Shakespeare and Barefoot in the Park or whatever, we're just going to cast our white people, And so I'm like, okay, why does it take, how can I only get an opportunity when I have to have some dumb Asian play? And not to say the Asian play is dumb, but just to say that's the only opportunity I have to even get a chance to be seen by them. And then when I'm like, oh, I want to be seen for the other ones. And they're like, oh, no. We got our people. We already got our people. And so that's just one of the problems that was addressed by We See You. And the others is just like the resources. I remember, shit, I'm just going to fucking call them out. When I did Viet Cong and Theater Squared, it was in Fayetteville, Arkansas. It was the home of fucking Walmart. And Walmart was our sponsor. And so, that's already a problematic sign right there. So when we were doing the play, we got great response from the community. We got, the Vietnamese community came out in fucking droves. They were passionate about this play, and we could feel it. We were like, dude, this is amazing. And they were like, okay, what are the reviews? And we seen that the other productions of Theater Square had like boatloads of reviewers. And be like, oh, you look at this. And then Viet Cong, we had one review, and it wasn't even a review. It was like, it was a recap. And then, so I asked the director, who then later told me much later on, because she confessed, she was like, I didn't have a good time there. And she was the person, a woman of color.
But
God damn, we can go off for hours on
right? Yeah, please continue. I just want to remind you.
I'm just going to end it there. Well, basically summarize that white theater-led companies have their own issues where it's like, because when a board is majority white people, you're gonna have these problems. It's just gonna happen.
In whether every it's studios too. Yeah, institutional
it's
studios.
Intentional or it's not. Where it's like, it's just innocent ignorance. And the thing is, like, you just need people of color. And this is where I know the arguments will be like, well, we only hire by talent and all that. And I'm like, don't fucking kid around with me, okay? Like, when it comes to the Hollywood industry, who's really being hired for talent? Come on. Who's really being hired for talent? You see the garbage that's happening on TV? You call that talent?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? And then, and I know I used to, be like them where I was like, oh, I would like shit on like Fresh Off the Boat or like the new Aquafina show. And then I'm like, hold on, hold on. Why am I complaining? Isn't
There's only
success
been two, yeah.
when we can have our own mediocre to terrible TV shows and it does well? Isn't that
Yep.
success? And I'm like, that's
But we need
success. And
more. We need more. We
not
got to
every
demand and push
minority
for
show
more.
has, yeah, not every minority thing has to be a fucking masterpiece, nor,
No.
or what white people love is the oppression porn, where it's like, oh, here's another slave story. I'm like, God damn it, not enough. And then I just saw Will Smith and Antoine Fuqua, or they're gonna make a slave movie, and I'm like, come on, man,
Mm.
how stupid can you guys be? Just make another awesome film. Don't do this slave shit. And then that's why I was joking that, like, what does it take for Asians to get our own Oscars? Do we have to make our own sob story of a Chinese transcontinental railroad story of these Chinese railroad workers that got blown up to bits? And I'm like, is that our Oscar kind of thing? And so
Mm.
that's where I'm just like, God damn. But anyways, I'm glad we're calling them out, and we need to keep calling
Mm-hmm.
them out, not just in the entertainment industry, but also just our family members, to
Yep.
our friends. When they say something racist, call them out on it and be like, hey, that was unacceptable. And it's just, just because you can't join the protest because, out of public safety, because, we still have the fucking pandemic going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you can have the hard conversations with others, and this is where, if Rukmani is still here, thank you, Rukmani. It is hard work, but it will
Mm-hmm.
nowhere near come close to what a black person has to ever feel or
Mm-hmm.
experience, or the mental and emotional
Right.
labor of just constantly being judged, of
Right.
constantly wondering, is this the day I die? We will never have this concern when a police officer pulls us over. We'll just go, fuck, what now? But we'll never have like, will I die?
It's so sad.
Will I die? Or will this woman who's staring at me and pull out her phone, is she going to call the cops on me?
Mm. Isn't
We're
that
never going
crazy?
to
That's
learn that.
so sad. Yeah, it's horrible that people take advantage of that and they
Yeah.
know. It's crazy. But do you guys have questions? I just want to make sure we got like about 10 minutes, 1:48. Any questions? It says we got a question here. And I mean, if you want to speak more, please do,
No.
Eddie.
We'll wait a
Let's
few
see. There's
so I
a
can
question.
breathe a bit.
Okay, by Young Bunny. It says, let's see. Does the issue of colorism that exists in Asia have a correlation with the attitude that most parents have here in the States?
Oh, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. I'm
Go
gonna
Young
say yes.
Bunny.
I'm gonna say yes to that. Colorism is such a real issue, and it covers almost all of the spectrum of the Pan-Asian continent. Like, like Korea, where I'm from, like, we're obsessed with, like, light skin product. We want the lighter skin product. We are obsessed with lightness. And I
Mm-hmm.
know the same can be said for the Filipino community. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but in terms of colorism, like, we want to be lighter
Mm-hmm.
because lighter is better.
Mm-hmm.
Lighter means more privilege. Lighter means, more power and all that kind of stuff. And then also, like, where we have, like, when I look in Korea, who are, the ones working the quote unquote undesirable jobs? It's like the janitors, the cooks, and
Mm.
all the dishwasher. And in Korea, a lot of them are Filipinos. And we
Oh,
have,
really? I didn't know
yes,
that.
we have very real racism towards the Filipino community
In
who
Hong
work.
Kong, they're nannies, and they
Yeah.
are, yeah. The Southeast Asians, you got to be honest, in Hong Kong, I mean, Asia has their own, right? So Hong Kong, they're nannies. They have Southeast Asians from even Cambodia be nannies. It's kind of like a status thing, and that's something in Asia. It's funny because we don't have like in Asia, it's like everyone's Asian. So how do you differentiate from each other? By status, by how you look, how you dress, right? By creams, by light. And that's why it's like by what you wear, the brand names. It's so crazy. And so that's why it's interesting to hear from our parents when they're like, oh, why didn't the server serve me first, but serve, my maid? And we're like, what did you say? Like, they're, and that's
Yeah.
a whole nother, right? But go on. Yeah, please.
And then I'm gonna say this: it's like, when you come to America and we eat or any of these Asian restaurants, and the 90% chance who is making the food is usually Latinos. And this is where I'm kind of like, dude, Latinos are like fucking superheroes. I mean, like, they don't get the
Yeah.
credit because they basically learned everything. When the real apocalypse happens, the ones who had to learn everything, the ones who had to learn how to cook, how to clean, how to fix things, because honestly, people who are in privilege, usually white and non-black, East Asians, let's just be fucking honest, we don't know how to do any of this shit. We don't know anything. So it's just like, do I know stuff? I don't know jack shit. I'm such a privileged little fucking baby. So it's like,
Mm.
that's the thing that, you have to admit it. And when you point out to others, hey, I'm a privileged baby. Are you a privileged baby? And they're like,
Hmm.
excuse me, I'm not a privileged baby. I'm like, yeah, 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 you are. And it's just admit it. You don't know how to do
Yeah.
anything. So, anyways, that was a great question.
That was a really good question. But do you also think that sometimes it is colorism that does cause anti-racism and anti-blackness in our communities? But I also think it's a like the wedge of the model minority myth too. And
Hmm.
I think it's a combination of everything. I think for first of all, that's why it's so hard to mentally undo these upbringings, right? And to mentally, it's like going back to the robbery experience, like, oh, like why did I second guess the guy who tried to steal my phone? And
Yeah.
it took me like I was just running everything in the back of my head, like over and over. And I'm like, but if it was someone else, like, why are we so quick to judge? So yeah, privilege is a thing for sure. But how do we use our privilege to help those who need help too?
Hmm. How much time do
Hmm.
we have right now?
We still have like 8 minutes, so we're good.
Oh, wow.
We're
Okay.
we're good. Any other question, guys? Or we can just read some of the comments here.
Are
Um,
you a privileged baby?
I know there's so many great comments. Thank you, friends who joined. Um, or we can just keep talking.
Yeah, we keep talking shit, like, because I was like, oh man, the hour. I was like, oh, that's gonna be plenty of time. Like, oh no, that's
No,
because we kind of did like abbreviated versions of the things we talked about, and we kind of touched upon the industry and Asians as well. But I think it all ties together
it
in
does.
terms of just like the struggle that we're gonna continue to have, which is why like this is always my pet peeve, where it's just like I do not ever want to go to another diversity panel of just like how can we improve on this? And I know what they're going to talk about. It's like, okay, well, you need to make more stuff. You need to do stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't care about those. I don't care about this anymore because we know that's what it needs to be. But unfortunately, which is why this protests have been great, is just like, yeah, yes, we can make stuff, but the powers are still held by
Mm.
majority white men.
Who will
And
green
that's,
light these projects or allow these whatever it is that we're trying to make get passed by. So how, it's like it really sucks if our ability to make projects, whether in the film industry or whatever, or to get that management position is up to these higher ups who are,
Mhm.
like you said, predominantly Caucasian people who maybe sometimes it's fear too. I think they're scared of losing their position, and that's
Yeah.
why there's fear on both sides. I
Yes.
think that's why there's people who are like fighting, making nasty comments, trying to rebuttal about how I'm racist because I'm trying to bring more acceptance and more hires to the people of color and black community.
Denise brought a good point. Yes, that's absolutely true. There are problematic people of color in the power positions, and sometimes they do it because they don't want to look like they favor their own people, and so that's why they don't do it. And others, because this one, I'm not gonna call on because I still love the theater company to a degree, but there is a theater company that recently hired a diverse artistic director, but
Mm-hmm.
he tends to skew towards hiring all white people for the cast. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's like a real discussion to have. It's like, great, we have a person of color who's on, the high position, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't actually mean anything when he always prefers you know, the privilege, when he always prefer like, you know, white people.
We got to
And
be
so that,
intentional. Yeah.
yeah. And so just that's where it's like, just because someone is a person of color or is a woman, you know, I remember with South Korea when we had our woman president, and we were like, oh my God, amazing. And then we learned she's the daughter of a dictator. And then
Mm,
who, like, you know that woman, right? Well, I forgot her name.
I don't. Yeah.
Oh, you don't know?
Sorry.
Yeah. Holy crap. Yeah.
Yeah.
She got ousted because her counsel was from her cult leader friend. And so
Oh,
Korea
wow.
protested for weeks to get her out of the office because she was taking advice from a fucking cult leader.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
so,
so sometimes it's intentional. I think some people choose like, oh, we do have a diversity program, but are they actually improving the diversity sector, or are they purposely like a good kind of hush hush person that's not really
yeah,
making. And the sad thing is, I think it really does take a generation to like flush. It's not saying like, oh, we're minimizing work. It's more of like we're expanding the aperture. You know, someone told me it's like, oh, why don't you produce something and make something? And it's like, yeah, but is it getting passed? Like, is it even taken seriously? And is it being, you know, why do we
yeah,
always have to fight to not fight, but why do we always got to settle for like, you know, smaller streams? Why does it have to end up just being an indie film? Why can't it just be like a studio thing? And that's something we got to ask ourselves too, right? It's like, why do you kind of shove us and say, oh, you know, like it can be an indie thing, it can be a Netflix thing, but you know, maybe ABC, I don't know, you know, it's like, but why? And you have to look at the history of like green lighting certain projects. It's like, well, are you making this decision based on yourself or based on the majority of the population who want to see this? It's like, you know, it's hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I just thought we could technically just keep going, and we would have to start another stream, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's up to you. That's up to you. I know, like, I'm like, oh shit, we can go on for, but
we
we can.
can. Let's,
Mm,
but I think it's also important to find allies within each other. So the idea of this is also to remind ourselves that we're not saying, hey, you know, we're like, you guys, white people are wrong. It's like, we are trying to work together. How can we efficiently and effectively work together? And how can you guys listen to us and apply, you know, our pain, our struggles, their pain, their struggles. Anyways, now we got the 2 minute mark, but we can go on. So we can always do a second stream, you know. And I mean, I always need a running list of people to talk about because I'm just in my room in my head, you know. So,
I mean, my day is free, so we could technically go on for another half hour, hour at most, and then yeah, that's like usually good. Like, okay, let's rest, and then if people drop to like we only have one viewer, like, all right, cool, time. It's like one of those party things, like, oh, okay, we'll
I
leave.
guess we're not, you know, yeah. We should definitely reconvene. I definitely want to save all the conversations, and I will ask you again to chat because that's why I asked, and I knew you would have a lot of great things to say, Eddie. And we need allyship in our own communities and other communities. So, anything else? We got 1 minute and 8 seconds. The show must go on.
That's cool.
Should we host another?
Whether I don't know, we could always do another time.
I think it's better to just save it and do another time because we got
Not
to
time.
stay, you know what I mean? Like this interest. We'll do it in the evening. Sometimes people hop on more, I feel, in the evenings.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah,
So
let's do
we'll
that. Well,
do, yeah, we'll do a part two.
okay. I think my partner will chime in as well. She has very amazing opinions, so she might pop in every now and then. Her name's
Yeah.
Josephine Chen, by the way,
Oh,
so.
she should definitely do it.
Um,
We need more people. We need to hear each other's deep conversations so we can just be more aware of these situations. All right, you got
right.
30 seconds. But thank you,
Cool.
friends.
Anyway, thank you for joining us. Man, that was great. I was like, oh, this is great to talk about this shit. There's so
Yes.
much shit. But anyways,